Have a real meeting.
Yay.
Yes.
Yay, us. All right. So, get here. All right, so we call the meeting to order. I attached the minutes to the email I sent out on Monday. Did everybody get a chance to read those?
Yes.
All right, do we have a motion to accept the minutes as is?
I move we accept them as is.
Okay, do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
All us.
All right.
I abstained.
Right, because you weren't there. That's all right.
Max, thank you for getting those minutes. I appreciate it. That's a thankless job, but somebody's got to do it. I think what I want to do now is go right to the SEDS and the TIF, so which is part of my. I've somehow made that part of my chairman's report, but I have nothing else to report. So why don't we? Where do you want to start?
I'm just going to, we sent out, we're starting a draft document, a TIF document.
Okay.
So it has some structure to it, and we'll build on this after every meeting. This is just, I'm calling it a working draft because it's all subject to change. I'm just going to go through it very briefly.
Okay.
Just so you know what's here. The first 2 pages are the current list of properties, and we are subject to some parameters. We have limitations on total valuation, which is not going to be a problem at this point, but this TIF can have only, this single TIF can have no more than 2% of our total land area, so we're bound to. And the total TIFs throughout the town eventually have to max out at 5%, but no single TIF can be more than 2%. So, of the land area.
Is this one? Is this a single TIF?
This is a single TIF.
Got it.
So these are the properties so far, and it shows the valuation and address. This is all subject to change and revision also. And then on the 3rd page, and the next rendition there's TIF application outline. There's some. The first thing there's a whole cover letter submittal application. Those are all forms. We'll add those in as we go, and then from here on in, there are the sections of the TIF that will get fleshed out as we move along. I just want to draw your attention to the title, Development Program, and there's 3 categories here, and I put some items in here just for our discussion. The first one is cost improvements made within the district, and that means improvements that are within the properties that we've identified or adjacent to those properties.
Can you explain who makes those improvements? Is that like improvements by those owners, or?
No, this is public infrastructure.
Okay, thanks. That's what I needed. Yeah.
And then cost of improvements made outside the district but related to the district. This would be, for instance, the sewer expansion to the industrial park. It's outside of the district, but it goes to it, and that's perfectly legitimate.
Yeah.
And then the last one is town-wide or community-wide municipal investments, and I put a couple in. The last one, or the last 2, one deals with trails, which is a legitimate category in the TIF, and the last one is kind of an omnibus one that says providing local match for economic development grants that meet the criteria of the TIF legislation, and then we have to put in some cost estimates there on that. We have to. I just put some numbers in, and that will flesh out as we go along, and then the rest is specific things that we have to address in the TIF itself, and a list of appendix. I'm not going to go through those right now because those we're going to flesh out as we go along, and I just basically put boilerplate information in there on that. The only thing that I do want to point out is that, where is it, in the financial plan, there's a line item there, the amount of public indebtedness to incur. I said the town does not intend to incur public indebtedness associated with this district. I'm going to change that to allow the town the ability to take out a bond.
If they need to.
Yeah, and what you would typically do is that if you have TIF revenues, because we're gonna estimate the TIF revenues that we're capturing. So we're gonna know how much is in that pot, so that we could bond, say, take out a 20-year bond for, say, the sewer expansion, and then use the proceeds from the TIF annually to pay it
the
off.
To pay the
bond.
bond off.
So it gives us that option
Yeah.
on that there if you wanted.
So the town puts the town on the line, but the money's coming from the TIF.
Could come from the TIF.
Yeah.
And just so, and just to reiterate, we've talked about this before, is that the captured revenues from the TIF, which are the increase in value over the original evaluation, which would be 2018, would be the baseline. Though that money doesn't go into the general fund, it goes into a TIF account.
Separate.
And there could be multiple TIF accounts. The town could say, all right, we're gonna take that money and put a pot, put a line item in here for sewer, a line item in here for trail. You can do that if you want. That's the money that used. And the other point is that when we go to use that, it's just like a warrant article. It has to be approved by the town meeting, so there would have to be a line item.
Right.
That you're gonna take money, instead of for the general fund, you take it from the TIF account for the thing. So it goes through the regular public process.
There's no borrowing allowed, right?
Well, no, you can borrow, that's the whole point.
That's what a
about it.
bond
Oh, I mean, but the borrowing for other
No, it has to.
designated
No, it
purposes.
has to be used, the TIF has to be
That's what I
used.
meant.
The only things that the TIF can be used for is for the objects in the development program.
Right.
Yeah, it can't be. If you want to use it for something else, you have to take it out and put it in the general fund on that there, and that
And
is
to
a
take
process.
it out, then you have to vote to do that, right? For the-
That can happen by the select board.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but once you take it out, it's taken out, and then that value isn't captured anymore. So in other
So
words,
it reduces it down.
it reduces it down. Now, towns do that because toward the end of their TIF, they run out of projects, they're not anticipating any project, so they gradually, instead of putting the money into that TIF account and just having it sit there, eventually it's gonna go into the general fund anyway, if they're not using it, and they just gradually say, all right, well, we're gonna take most of it and put it into the general fund. That could be done, that could be done.
Did they at that point get rid of the TIF?
No, the TIF would stay, you can do that, but what you can do, what most towns do is just, they do one of two things, they just take a pot of money and put it into
Once a year, they take that pot of money and move it
Right.
over. Yeah.
Or they, right now, we're gonna say, we're gonna take 100% of the captured value and put it into the TIF account. They can amend the TIF and say, all right, we're only gonna put 50%.
Oh, okay.
And that's
And
another
50
way.
into the general, yeah.
And you look at your, if we have no projects that we're conceivably gonna do, then we can start putting that back.
By the end of the 30-year period?
Yeah.
Is that what that is? Yep.
So
Usually that's when towns start saying that, we just don't have any.
this has implications for the Director of Finance's office in terms of the time and effort she's going to have to put into this. Does that typically change in any way? Is there a small enough burden so that it happens once a year? And
No, with the TIF itself, the revenue, we do, putting the TIF together is your front end, there's a lot of work. And then all that happens is that the value, we know, we're gonna know for these properties in the TIF, original valuation goes general fund, the new goes here, and it's all.
so, for example, from Daryl's perspective, I assume his, I've forgotten what you call it, his software can just automatically tag the properties. It just happens. He gives a number to the select board and the director, and
He's gonna report once a year, to the state, But they do, we do that anyway, the reporting, so we have to take the value, the money that we're capturing and changes in that valuation. Say somebody during the course of a year, a business built something, so there's a lot of value, so he'll report that change in value in total, they do.
Certainly appreciate your detailed understanding of this. Thank you.
It's not, this once operated is fairly easy, because the money then goes into an account, and we all, it's just like any other
Line item.
capital accounts
Yeah.
or something like that.
So the basis begins at 20 million, right, roughly? The total valuation.
Well, that would be the original value.
Right.
Now, that 20 million it will continue to go,
Right.
to the general fund. It's only anything after that.
Right, and so then that will be determined when people make improvements to their
Right.
property.
It's done two ways, improvements to the property or increases in valuation that occur.
Okay, so what if somebody sells off part of it?
Then it goes down.
Then it goes down, and does the new property get into the?
Say for instance, for any reason, the assessor lowers the valuation, all right? And it goes below the 2018, that still goes into the original, and we only use the amount above.
And then the other parcel, say they divide the piece of parcel and somebody
Goes
builds a
to two.
business on that other piece.
Yeah.
Does that become part of this?
Yeah, if it's the same, if that entire parcel is part of the district and they divide it,
Yep.
it's still, yeah,
Okay.
it's still considered.
That's the detail I
what-
wanted.
What are any of the downsides, risks? There must be some. There's never a perfect golden
I mean,
egg.
That's a big
I
sum.
guess, I'm not quite sure there are any risk other than not
Default.
being able to spend the money that, for projects that you're gonna do. And I don't know if that's a risk. I guess the way, and the reason I'm answering it that way is that this is just tax funds. This is just, the TIF is nothing different than saying we're going to segregate these monies that we capture from these properties and use them exclusively for economic development
Right.
purposes. That's the only
Instead
difference.
of
Economic development purposes exclusively in the TIF
That's right.
designated
yeah,
property
yeah, absolutely.
area.
No.
Oh, no, because the
no.
public can run the
Right.
sewer
Right.
up there.
Right, if
Right.
we have, exclusively for those areas we identify in the development plan, in this TIF.
And it can be modified
Right, we could say, for
by
instance,
vote.
in year 15, we say, well, we want to add the SER to another area, or do something else that's a legitimate thing. We can modify the TIF to add that in.
I sent everybody an email, I think, that was an article, Rockport's just doing that now.
Right, I saw that.
They're adding areas. Well, I thought it was a good example.
Yeah, that's why I looked at it in detail.
And that was to do with sewer. We added,
Yeah.
I think, 7 properties, and are going, it'll add an additional 10 years to the existing TIF. So it'll go from a 20-year TIF to a
Yeah,
30-year.
I think Seth's comment about downside risk is something that I'd like to delve into that a little further, because I'm paranoid about risk.
Well, there's,
You heard me already on that one.
this is just tax money.
Right.
That we're diverting
But,
From this,
from, in other words, let me put it this way, you don't need a TIF. The town could say, we're going to take a percentage of all the new economic development value we get, and instead of, taking that amount of money, and instead of putting it into the general fund, we're gonna separate it out and put it, we can do that right now, without a TIF. The advantage of a TIF is twofold. One is that we shelter monies that would normally reduce the amount of value we get from that increase in valuation because of aid, state aid, and also county tax and school,
Right.
and money we get from the school, because those monies are, as our valuation goes up, our state aid goes down,
Yeah.
as our valuation goes up, county tax goes down, and as our valuation goes up, the educational money we get goes down also. So in other words, the state holds us harmless for 30 years on the original values on all these properties.
so you have that added value to the
Right.
town without it getting watered down
Watered
by all
down,
that.
right. And we'll do that calculation to show
So-
how much we're getting,
Right.
what the
So-
value
so-
is.
So then, the mechanics of that are interesting, a step further. Earlier, we touched on this. If the select board decides to change their mind about what they're gonna use the funding for, out of there, they can do it with strictly a select board vote?
Yes, now what has to happen is that the TIF has to be amended, because we have to tell the state that we are no longer.
Right.
Say that value comes out to $1 million. Well, we have to make sure the state knows, because we're gonna get dinged for that now, because they can,
Because we
that
reduced
goes
the
into the
basis.
general fund. So there is a process that goes on here.
So you reduce the basis when
That's
you do
right.
that.
We need to figure out some way to inform the general public of the details you just mentioned, and
Yep.
make sure they understand the positive aspects in their pocketbook.
Yeah, this is, I mean, it's more, when you say downsides, it's really selling this to the community.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
You
what I-
can't use this for anything. It can't be used for municipal projects. It has to be used just for, fairly defined.
That
And that's one
everybody
of the
votes.
advantages, is that you kind of predict how you're going to use that money.
It's regulated.
in the general.
And they're projects that likely wouldn't get done otherwise.
Likely, yeah.
So at the end of 20 years, say we do 20-year,
We're going to do,
we have $20 million worth of valuation that's been off the books.
yeah,
Pop, it goes on the books.
yeah. We're going to
Then
get
what are the
hit.
implications for state reimbursements? We could take a substantial
You're
hit.
going to take a hit, yeah, at that point, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. But then again,
30 years, by the way.
20 or 30.
and
Well,
that's
he
why a
said
lot
it's
of
running
towns
for 30.
will gradually, as they
Phase out.
approach that, to change the percentage and
Right.
kind of,
And so you can taper it.
you can taper it, yeah.
In the last
And-
10 years or something like that.
Yeah,
And
when you're-
also, like Rockport did, they added 10 years to their TIF.
Well, we can max out at 30.
Oh,
We can't
okay, so
go
we're doing 30.
above 30.
All right.
And you're recommending 30
Yeah, I'd recommend 30.
Why?
The reason is 30 is that it's going to take a long time for this TIF to grow.
to grow a little bit.
That's going to take a long, you're really not going to have a pot of money in here that's usable
For a
for
while.
a good
So,
decade.
so pitching something to this town can be difficult. For example, pay-as-you-throw, something that's clearly,
Oh, yeah,
definitively good economically, just beyond
Has anyone
question.
done a pro
So-
forma spreadsheet on that?
We're-
As we go forward, look forward 5 years from now?
Yeah, that's going to
10
be
years.
part of the application, yeah.
But-
We have to do for every year in the 30-year, the changes in the value,
Right.
and then 30-year for the impact of the sheltering on that there. But we can't do that until we get the
Yeah,
the
because
district.
that'd be something useful to show, people are gonna ask, well,
Yeah.
what is the amount of money
Yeah.
that we'll have available?
That will be
Time.
part of this, but we can't do it, John,
Yeah.
until we hone down where the district will be on
Very
that
good.
at this point. yeah. So
If I put these properties on a map and colored them in like we did
We have.
way back in the day,
Yeah.
is this all blotchy or is it
No, we
districts?
well,
You have
yes
that
and no.
map?
Like, is the
Yeah, I have-
historic district
Jen, I have
all
it
in
right
here?
now, actually.
Yeah, you'd love to
We're
see.
suggesting in here, we have to submit all the tax maps that show the properties in the application
I'll have to-
already.
We don't have to
So
do
we've done just a markup. But Max put this on the large map, which will show.
You want to quickly take a look before I have to get it over down.
So Ori,
Yes.
so they really are discontiguous.
Well, they can be, but we've identified.
That's the railroad.
Railroad.
This is the no wait, this is the railroad. This is the CMP power line.
Oh, right, yes, yes.
They don't all have to touch. We just have to create a logic for it. And we do have a logic for it. We
Yep.
always have a logic for
This is
everything.
early town landing.
So
These two guys are just developing.
Just make it.
Sylvania.
Well, this is, and this was a tough one to do.
Yep. Yeah, these were mostly just some undeveloped lands along railroad.
What we're proposing at this point is one TIF with two geographic kind of areas. One is gonna be, well, this area here around the industrial park, greater industrial park. And the other one we're calling the Route 1 Village Corridor. So we're taking this and like this.
Everything in there, basically.
Well, not everything, no, just the identified properties. But we're just saying.
Why do we do that? Why can't
Because we
just-
have a limit on the amount of
2% of the-
properties.
This is
So if you
only-
do big swaths, you
Yeah,
come up
because
against it.
this property actually is all the way right there
This
connected.
is the road.
But let's say somebody,
That's Carl
Chevy.
Anderson's, I
let's say somebody buys this property to develop.
Yeah.
Can you add that property to the
Yeah,
TIF?
eventually, yeah, you can modify the TIF to do that.
But you
Which
still
is
have to
what
stay
Rock-
within how much, 5%?
Well, it's,
Well, this has to be
Total
2%.
townwide, 2%
each
for the
TIF can be no more than 2%. We're a little over 2 with the properties we have, so we have to do some adjustments here on that.
So there's a cap that's regulated.
Yeah, there's 2 caps. Each TIF can be, each TIF component can be no more than 2%, and the total amount of properties in all the TIFs can be no more than 5%.
Yeah, that's
Is this
right.
the old water source?
That's the
No.
Odd Alewives.
Ah, it was, okay.
And this is
the,
map?
no,
That's-
this is the old water source.
Yes.
That is, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the question that we ask is that on all these properties, Jen, is that we're predicting properties that potentially will add value. So that's a question we're
Add
asking.
value,
That
right.
eventually over that 30.
So you
not
could
all-
look at that and say, well, you know, maybe they'll expand the brewery, right? Is the thinking.
That's
They
the
become a
thing.
great success and
Yep.
they get a bigger
So
building.
that you don't go over the cap, then you have
Bob.
to take some other
Morning.
properties out.
Morning.
You could,
To
yes.
make it a more efficient return.
Yeah, we have to cull that list and ask some
Yeah.
questions, you know.
We're looking at the TIF map.
So is this property included, I mean, is all of this commercial zone included, or,
Just the orange bits.
okay, so
Just
this
the
is
ones.
the Moody's cabins, and Moody's.
Yep.
Yeah, again,
Is
the
this within
question.
the commercial?
Yeah,
Or is that just of interest to us?
I think
Audio?
the commercial
I
goes
mean,
half.
commercial doesn't go to here for sure.
Well,
This is the village. area.
village zone.
Village district,
Is there,
Sylvania,
So,
Yep.
nothing down here?
no.
Why is the reason for that?
we're staying within 2%.
There's
We have to
there's
stay
nothing up
within
here
2%.
either.
Oh, you do?
Right.
We might eliminate like the Dutch Neck and the town parcels.
How
because
about
we
Orange
could
Corner Road?
cover
You've got it,
it.
you've got it. This building here, Lee Nielsen's using this huge area here to
Right
make
here.
wooden
Right, but the thing is, we have to,
tables and things.
Right, that's where we are right now. We have to amend that, go take another look at that.
And I'd
But-
also suggested you include our property as part of the district.
So what happens, Bill, as this grows, say it grows spectacularly, the economy keeps cooking along, in 10 years from now, we're up to 4% for these properties. Does that matter?
Well,
Or is that what you're actually after?
what
that
we could
growth?
do, we could always create another TIF district.
Should we, or
Well-
are you capped by the 2% is what I'm
Well,
asking?
each
5%
TIF district,
total.
yeah, the total in the town cannot exceed 5% of your
At
land.
inception?
No. Each district that you create can be no more than 2%.
Yeah.
And then the total of all your TIF
Yeah.
districts can be no more than 5.
But is it at inception, that number?
Well,
So we're 2% here, we're
This one is
1.999.
2%, that's right.
But then it grows and does very well, which we could anticipate about the corridor and the business park. And now we're at 3% or 4%.
Well, no, this one can't grow beyond 2%. It cannot-
I'm in actual tax assessment.
Oh, no, no, not,
No,
no,
this
this
is
is
just
geographic
land.
area.
He's talking
Yeah,
land.
we're just,
Land area.
we're just-
Oh, valuation, we do have a cap on valuation, no more than 5%
Okay,
of the, but that's the origination of the TIF.
that's what I meant.
Not
Is at
the
the
value.
beginning, if you do
value,
spectacularly
The
well,
value
that's
can
fine.
increase and that's fine.
Great, okay.
so it's
I'm
2% of
sorry.
our land.
Yeah, 2%, so we have it that geographic. Again, the question we have to ask here is, we're looking over a 30-year window, and this is hard to do, is where do we anticipate the
So, John asked a good
anticipation for
question.
development?
What about North and South Waldeboro?
Again, we have to ask that question, is the land zoned for industrial?
There's a place up here that is, it's Orange Corner
Yeah,
and
Yeah,
32.
you've got two big buildings.
Two
in
Yes,
there.
buildings.
right.
Yeah.
They're already doing things there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the question I guess I would ask if I were looking at this in your perspective is that an efficient use of?
No, that's why.
That's why it's not there,
We
right?
have to go
The
through that
land's
list
too big,
again,
maybe.
and we have to make some really
Yeah,
tough
yeah.
decisions.
You have to fine tune the percentages
we
here
do.
to stay under the caps.
We have to say what has the highest and best potential for growth. And some may grow, but they may not have that capacity to.
When you look at, like, this is, you said this is Sylvania?
No, this is
Sylvania
Sylvania.
over here, this is Route 1.
This is just wooded.
So,
Yeah.
so will Sylvania, could that property really be a tax?
Sure.
So what's
It's a
your?
brownfield, it could be reused.
By the way, I was told not to use that word on that property.
It is a brownfield.
It is.
No, it isn't.
Yes.
I was reprimanded by the town manager in front of the senator,
She's mistaken.
representative for calling it a brownfield.
Yeah, I know.
It's a brownfield.
It is a
Did you hear about that?
Yes, I did.
Well, good, I'm mad about
Not your
it too.
fault.
But,
No, come on, John.
I mean, the way it was delivered, it was really bad news. You weren't here to see it.
No, I wasn't, you're right.
Yeah, but technically it is a brownfield.
So-
because it's,
so-
Well, I hope she apologizes to me, because that really.
She said the same thing to me. And she doesn't understand.
Well,
So my point is, like, that's, to me, that's like a big piece of land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you feel like your vision is somebody would buy it and build something.
Well, we put it in there because it's zoned industrial.
And the point
We can
is-
question that. you know,
And the
again,
point of the piece is that you can isolate the area that's affected.
Yeah.
And the rest of it doesn't have to be included in that category.
So it doesn't have to be the whole property, it
No,
could be
no.
a piece of the property.
Well, it's a lot.
As long as they
You have to develop a
delineate
lot.
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the areas
You're
of
not gonna do
concern,
that.
the rest of it should be available.
But if you can, I mean, in these properties, they encapsulate them.
Exactly.
This is not, you know, at this point, I mean, they're whatever they do, that water, there's a technical word where they have the wells and aerating and all that sort of stuff and monitoring it. So, I mean, they've been very responsible for that site.
Right.
But it technically can be reused.
Is this the,
That's
is that maps, and that goes all the way
Yeah.
over to?
To the old water source.
Yeah.
And we only included the MAPS property because of the commercial building and the location in the village, the barn on the back of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's,
Certainly come around.
well, again, we're gonna, you know, this is our first foray into this. So we have a lot of hard questions.
Well, these are all the right kind of things to talk about, so we can all self-educate
Yeah.
ourselves as to how to tune this up.
So I guess,
Yeah.
as we look at other properties, I guess we have to ask the question, they may grow, but what's the potential? I mean, what's the realistic potential for those
And
properties?
how do you identify them? How do you,
Well,
how do other towns go, oh, they look at what the taxes are, like highest tax?
No,
No.
we did the same thing. We created a large list of properties.
Yeah.
And we didn't include all of them in this first column. So we have to go back and say, you know, are some of these valid? Do we have to take in, add? Do we pull out some that we should reconsider, like the property there, or properties down here on Friendship? You know, those are questions we have to ask. And we may, you know, just see, you know,
Yeah.
it isn't, we're making our best guess.
Did you guys remember when we had that big map and we were all writing all
Yeah,
over
yeah,
the map?
yeah.
That's what they're trying
Yeah.
to cull down from.
Yeah.
Because we were identifying everything we knew. That
Now,
was
the other thing
commercially
too is we were
used.
asked, this is the first TIF. This is our first. Let's do it, let's give this our best shot. If in the future, 10, 15 years from now, we start to see a lot of development or
Somewhere
potential
else.
project, we can
Yeah.
create another TIF.
Got it.
And let me give you an example. Let's say CMP does a big major upgrade, or natural gas comes in here. I'm just using examples.
Yeah.
We could create a TIF that includes that development area, put that in a TIF, and use the value, the increase in value of that for community-wide projects.
Once this is in a TIF, say the original,
Yeah.
and it does very well, say we run the sewer
Oh.
up here sometime for independent reasons.
And it grows.
And it grows. Is it wise to, can you remove it, or can you segregate it into TIF number 2, such that you're not constraining yourself?
Constraining that gets a little tricky. That really,
So does
I'm
it
not
make
quite
sense
sure.
to have that particular piece right now in the original TIF? That's a big amount of area compared to your 2%.
Well, that's questions we have to ask around that there. Once
Yeah.
we create the TIF, splitting it off into another one, they don't like that at all.
Okay,
I mean,
that's fine, it's just strategically when
I mean,
you
we can add to the original TIF.
Right.
though, As long as we're under that
But you can't.
2%.
You can't subtract.
Remember Rodney
In
coming
other words,
over
if you
here?
decide there's a trade-off, you'd
Yeah.
rather take one parcel out that isn't going anywhere.
Yeah. Oh,
and put a
then-
parcel in that is going
Technically,
Put all
we
our
can't
hands
do
on
that.
where we think people might
Because
actually.
it is a
Remember
trade-off.
Rockport,
I'm guessing that'll be
Rockland
your
rather,
next
Rodney
step.
I mean, somebody might
explained
say,
the
I'm
tip
gonna
to us
change that to
8 years
residential.
ago.
Yes.
We could pull
Remember
it out.
that? Yeah.
Right.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, I know, but how they did it,
Oh, well.
they
So what
designed
is your
it.
timeline for thinking about this now? Yeah, and we got this far, you've identified a set of properties, a
Well,
potential
we're,
TIF.
I think the next two discussions we have to have is refining the district, number one, and start looking at fleshing out the development work plan. And that's why you've got the copy that you have. And we also sent out a kind of a memo with some potential things to look at. So we need to start, I would work at it backwards. Instead of doing it this, let's start attacking that development program, because that might help flesh out where properties might come and go too.
Sorry, Julie can't make it this morning, but she wanted to be connected by phone.
Oh, okay.
And so I'll
This-
call her
this-
and
see this?
put the speaker on.
We ought to get a map like this so we can color code it with all the cable and different types of providers on it.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Because this has all the detail that I would need to do this.
You could color in the cable. I mean, we should eventually see where all the cable is.
Yeah, I have a map of my own that I've
Right.
done, but I think it overlay. You have this on a computer, so you can.
Hi, Julie, good morning.
Normally.
Yeah.
We're all here looking at something you can't see. We're looking at this map that Max
But you
and
can actually-
Bill put together
Access this and
for the
modify it.
as a TIF draft. Yeah.
I can't take away the.
No, but you can add overlay.
We're just finishing up our discussion about that.
This has layers, this kind
And
of
then
a
I
graphic.
imagine Jan will call the meeting
So
to
the
order.
software, you can add a
Pretty
layer
soon.
showing
Pretty
all
soon.
the telecommunications distribution
I think we did have, didn't we call to order?
The meeting's still.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, we're in the
sorry.
meeting.
I misspoke. The meeting was called to order.
Yeah, we have a quorum.
We just started on this
What
stuff
we're-
because it was on
What
the,
we're
All right,
also
so
gonna do
can we
is-
get back to the meeting?
Yeah, what we're also going to do is after we refine this district, we have to create all the tax maps that are included. We have to take those, indicate what properties are in. This goes into the TIF application. And we also have to get an 8.5 by 11 version of the town map and show the properties.
And how do you
on there.
interface with owners of those properties? Don't you have to get their agreement and put it in the?
Not necessarily. I would recommend we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't necessarily need their them to acquiesce, because again, it's just,
Just a notification.
notification.
It doesn't impact them at all?
Not really.
No.
And there's no way that someone could sit here and say, I don't want you to do that because it
I
impacts me?
think politically, it would be smart to take that out then, yeah. But, I mean, we were just gonna explain to them, you know, we're not taking away anything that they can do with their property whatsoever. If they develop
I
it,
don't have my
fine.
Jaundice eye glasses on either, by
Yeah.
the way. I just know what it's like in this town for 10 years or 11 years.
Well, that's why
I think the argument
a
is
lot
that,
of input.
the argument is that the TIF money is going to be used for projects that could quite likely help you and other
Yeah,
businesses
and that's where-
in town.
Now, the one thing we are gonna do, and that's something we had a preliminary discussion on, is that we're not gonna use this for what's called credit enhancement, and that would be where funds go directly to a business.
Oh, right,
on
we're
that
not
there.
doing
We're-
that,
We're
yeah.
just not gonna have that component into the TIF. And that was something that we kind of all said, yeah, that's not gonna go over well. Fine. So the monies for the TIF are gonna be used for public infrastructure
There you go.
predominantly.
That's
So
very
it has that
important.
public value that relate to economic development in the district and also can relate to economic development townwide.
And that's a big point to people.
I'm sorry, Julie?
Sorry, Julie, what?
No, that's my navigation, sorry, go ahead.
All right.
All right, good. Anything else?
No, and I guess the next point of discussion that we need to start is working on the development plan. I just want to go through what we have
Let's do
a
that.
little briefly, and then we could.
All right.
Ed, do you want me to bring this over? Might as well just keep it.
Well, just before you do that, I have a question from George.
Sure.
So, George apologizes he couldn't be here, but he has a question, which is, the list of TIF areas seems complete. I am in ongoing negotiation with a company that would invest significantly in a building they need here in the park. It would be their building on property leased from the park. If it happens, I think likely it would start in the next 18 months. And there are a couple of others in the early stages. I would ask, if I were there, if the TIF opportunity is altered based on who pays to build the building, leased land or build to suit.
No, we just capture the new valuation. It doesn't matter
That's perfect then.
who builds it or the ownership. It doesn't matter. There's going to be a new value to that new building, and someone will be paying the taxes.
And he will,
whether it's-
right.
And
Okay.
that's between.
There is one snafu there in terms of the valuation, because if the land is being leased,
Yeah.
and George continues to own the land, the value of the land won't increase as greatly as it would were the property be held as an entity with land and building.
That would affect the value, but still, there's going to be new value in the new building.
But you would evaluate the building, right?
Right, he'd pay property tax on the building,
Now,
I
if
got
there's
it.
Property tax on
improvements
the
to the
Right,
land,
so you're still gonna get your value
That's
out
an
of it.
interesting point, though.
But if there's improvements
be
to
as
the
great.
land, like a paved parking
Yeah.
or something, that will increase that value.
Paved
also.
parking would increase, yeah.
You're right, Bob, it may not be as high.
Wouldn't the land be worth more because there's a building on it?
I would think in his
typically not.
situation, it would be worth less because the use of the land would be restricted
To that building?
to that building.
Got it.
John, could
It
you
typically
get
doesn't change.
behind you see how it's pulling down the,
Oh.
there you go.
Okay. We don't want to.
Well, it's already hanging by a thread there.
It'd be the same
Two threads.
situation
Yeah.
Additional threads.
if you had a retail strip mall and a tenant makes improvements to the building that increases the value, that's still an increase in valuation.
But equipment, for example, isn't, that's real
We're
property.
not including personal property.
Right. Should we, in terms of take that case in particular,
You could, but
wouldn't it make sense?
it adds a layer of complexity that I'm not quite sure you asked the question about what's the overall
So say-
capacity and
well-
logistics to it. I'm not quite sure you get that much value. If we had a paper mill here or something like that, I'd
That's
say
the
yeah.
perfect example.
But
But what if we had, for example, we can't do it, but say we had a really successful marijuana growing facility up at the business park or the Brooder or something like that, and it had high-tech stuff in it, and the actual value of that stuff was $1 million. We would want to capture that.
yeah, what was personal property right now, we wouldn't capture that. Now, we could do that, but then
There's
we
capital
would,
equipment, though, in the facility.
if it's part of the real estate, it's evaluated, but if it's not, it's personal property.
So it's part of the business capitalization.
The assessor would have to determine what's the real estate portion and what's the
So
personal
what
property.
type of an assessor does this type of?
Our assessor.
Okay.
There's a double-edged sword there, though. If you're going to include equipment in the TIF as being accessible for the benefit of the TIF, then you're going to tax it. And that is going to make this town less attractive.
Well, we already tax personal property.
We already tax.
I know we do.
Yeah.
And that is a very unattractive thing to be doing. I don't know how much we benefit and how much we have to make up for it, but it's stupid to do that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, it just
there's
is
the
stupid.
Betra program. It just adds I'm not quite sure. You're right, we could do it, but it adds
I'm just
a layer.
thinking Biogen
Yeah.
up on Route 1.
Now, if we were dealing with like a gas line or in the future or a
With a CMP upgrade.
then in that area, we might reconsider this completely. But for now, for what we have right now in Waldoboro or anticipate to have, I'm not quite sure it's worth the aggravation.
All right.
I don't know, we can relook at all this.
Do you know off the top of your head how we tax the substation? This is a point in case example.
think
We
that-
derive
We'd
significant,
have to ask Daryl. Yeah, all the CMP properties tax, I'm not quite sure if it's
because that's
real
equipment, that's
estate
not
or-
real estate.
Well,
The
that I
substation
don't-
is-
That I don't know.
That's the poster child for my example in the question, that's all.
I'm not quite sure of how that.
So your point is
Noticeable.
if somebody has a big empty building that might cost $200,000 to put up, but then puts in $2 million worth of equipment.
Precisely.
How do we tax that?
Some towns optionally, and I think we don't, except for CMP, tax machinery and equipment, personal
Well-
property.
No, the state tells us what we're supposed to tax.
I thought we had that discretion.
No.
No, not on
It's
that.
the Betty Better thing.
Yeah, that's adds a layer of
okay.
complexion that, that might not, that's something that, when the TIF program was originally formed, we didn't have those programs, so it just adds,
I'm just thinking about high-tech businesses.
Yeah,
What the
we can-
value of
It
the,
might be worthwhile to have Daryl come to one of these meetings.
Yeah,
and we can
okay,
ask-
absolutely.
yeah. Probably a little further on, when we get a little more
Detail.
focused on the
So he'll be
property.
the responsible party for watching over these kind of details and stuff?
Yeah, he's going to play a significant role in putting the table of valuations together, and we had a preliminary conversation with him to get him on board to, because we have to look at, over the 30 years, the valuation increases, so.
She's driving.
I just want to talk.
Sorry, I'm driving.
We can, no,
I just want to talk a little bit about two things. One is the development program, and in the handout that you have, and also we passed out a memo that just had some options for people to consider. And this is something I'd like to spend some time with at our next meeting.
This is the list of projects you're talking
Yeah,
about?
not the list, the list of projects, excuse me.
Yeah.
Development program. And in the draft, I put some boilerplate things in as a starting point. If the committee could take a look at those and also use the suggestions on this page as a jump-off point. Again, my advice is we're looking at a 30-year window, so we shouldn't be bashful about putting in projects. And we could be generic. Let me give you an example. We may say, well, we think there's a possibility for, I'll give two examples, one for a SIR to be expanded in one or two areas in town, but we're not quite sure which one or both would be viable. We can write that development program, that component of SIR expansion to serve expanded areas suitable for economic development, two areas are potential for that, we can name them and then put something in. We don't have to, we can be rather nebulous, but just say we've identified, and it may be used. Or we could say something like a new road to be added in this particular area, or a new road to access future economic development. We've identified 3 areas with potential, and if they're built, these are the projected costs. So we can be very specific or still kind of nebulous, but we have to get that kind of project in the plan for it to be, to use. So again, with that 30-year window, we're going to have to do some guessing. And we don't have to do the projects.
Right,
if
they're
in
just
the TIF.
options.
And the same thing with the estimated cost, they're estimations. When you end up doing the engineering and get the, those costs could be different, higher, lower, and they may, we may not be able to do them because of the cost is too high.
So these are somewhat in the comprehensive plan already?
For the
by
most
intent?
part, yeah, that's where I kind of got.
And then this is the next layer.
Yeah,
to
and this is
focus.
just taking them and putting them in. I mean, we have generic broadband in here, aquaculture, there's a couple
Right.
things. But just for this committee to start looking at that and saying, yeah, this is a priority, or fleshing it out a little bit more if you want to be specific, and we can do that. And then we'll come up with an estimated cost. I mean, we're going to use, unless we have hard engineering on the cost, we'll probably take a similar project and attach a cost to it.
When you put the costs in, can you put, this is 2018 costs, as opposed to what it could be 30
All we have
years?
to say estimated price.
Okay, all right, good.
There's an interesting sentence in there saying that the specific public improvements to be financed will be approved by action of the Town of Waldoboro Select Board.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
pretty narrow.
Well, you have to take that's specific language we have to put in the TIF.
You do.
The process, though, is that the select board, just like the normal warrant,
Right.
you say, yes, we want to go with this project, but we just can't go with it. It's got to go
gotta
to the
go to the
town
voters.
meeting.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Through the budget process.
But you originate, you make the decision, yeah, we're going to go with this, subject to approval of the
Okay.
town meeting. Because that's our legislative body.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Does that need to be clarified that way then?
No, we can, actually, we'll put some language in there, but as an explanation.
Yep.
We're limited in the TIF application, they want, they're very, so we're gonna have to put we'll work out a way of making that an or maybe in our introduction, we can do that. Or the executive summary we can add.
So at this point, you would like the committee to look at the list of
Yeah,
potential projects?
the ones in the draft and also from this memo.
Yep.
And we can have a discussion next, and, I'm just looking for ideas, expansions, narrowing this focus, and I'm hoping that this is a jump-off point to start, and then the meeting after that, we'll take a look at the property list. I'm kind of hoping that as we look at projects, we might say, this property might be good for that, or, and that'll give us another way of looking at that list.
One thing that appears to me that we've got to sell, the tax-paying public has to be clearly understand that this is not going to be detrimental to their pocketbook. We're going to be very
Right.
careful
It's
that
not gonna
one is
be.
carefully made.
Yep.
We need to make a connection that because the TIF can be used for economic development purposes as defined on that's the benefit to the community. And it does, what it does is, you said it best, this allows projects to happen that might not happen.
Yeah.
Because that money's there, and the biggest potential is that, and this is what most towns do, is that it's used to match grants.
There
Because
you
that's
go.
where.
Interesting.
Gives
if we-
leverage.
Yeah, because if we go to,
There you
like
go.
our SEDS project, if we approach EDA and say, we want to do this project, we want $1 million for you, the first thing they're going to say, well, match it with $1 million. So this
And now
gives
we're in a
us-
position we can say, yes, we
Now we
can.
can say, all right, we have these funds. And of course, sell it to the public. These have to be projects that the people want.
Exactly.
That they see benefit.
I like education
Yeah,
instead of,
yeah.
it's not about selling, it's about educating.
Well,
And I think that that's really key.
but it's identifying
Because-
what people want. and
Right,
saying,
because
this is-
truthfully, we had an education process
Yeah.
to even begin to understand this.
Oh, yeah.
So it's education
You have to
and
expect everybody
explaining.
will.
Right, explaining
Yeah.
and learning. And it is a process too, because it's complicated financials, but once you understand how to move it and evolve it so that the town benefits, then you understand.
The big first question that comes to mind would be, well, if we just let that money become added tax revenue based on the reevaluations and goes into the town budget. Why can't we just use the money that way rather than have it structured this way?
Because it saves money from, and gets us, what you're expecting. Right, our money doesn't go down what we receive for schools and
But we have
state
to-
aid and
We
so
have to
forth.
figure out a good kitchen table kind of way to explain that.
Yeah.
Because of the people that I know already about this kind of thing when we organize our.
Well, it's a way of saving money and gaining money to
Right.
use on what we want it to do and not to just be dispersed.
All right,
There's
I'm
one
gonna-
table that shows that.
I'm gonna have to call it.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Julie, are you able to give us a Town of Waldoboro update?
Julie,
Yes,
are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
We can hear
we
you.
can hear you. Jan was asking if you could do an update for the town.
Sure. So I don't know if anybody has been down to the Pine Street Landing, but it is looking pretty darn good. Has anybody been down?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. So that's going to be like a really nice addition to the town, and I think that'll be helpful at some point with downtown. I don't know. I don't know how many of you attended the raise the roof for the Waldo Theater. That's moving along swimmingly. Couple other things. The RFP for the LED streetlights is out. It was sent out, I think, to a total of 6 firms for responses. I haven't gotten any questions or feedback from any of those firms yet, just confirmation that they received them, which is a good thing. And those are like my really giant burning items that I can think of as I'm driving on 95 and avoiding being killed.
Awesome, thank you. John,
If you
communication?
have questions, though,
No questions. Those are all terrific.
if you have questions, just ask me as we go, and I'll answer anything.
Okay, thank you. John?
Okay.
Communication technology?
Communication technology update. As we head into September, we will continue on the basis that we are not getting any kind of a response out of Spectrum to do the fill-in on the pockets or the what we believe is still covered under the franchise agreement, which is only one road, not 2. It seems that since we did the mapping and discovery of unserved areas, Deer Run Lane off of 220 up by North Sauerkraut has been covered
By who?
by Spectrum.
Well, that's good.
So that leaves us with Chapel Road as the only one that's a franchise potential issue. The others are little pockets, and they have not responded. However, they have had their own engineering activity for their own plan, which did not get coordinated with us whatsoever, going and putting some numbers on different roads on their own in terms of what it would cost to put. And I think this might be due to stimulation from residents on those roads directly to Spectrum. And some of the information is interesting because it reveals what the cost would be if you went long haul to bring cable to a little road with only 4 or 5 people on it. And long haul means you have to run cable from an existing cable location to them. And the little pockets that we put together to propose to them did not include any of that. We were just looking at people that are 4 or 5 homes typically within a few poles of each other that are right next to existing cable that are unserved.
Wow.
And they are not responding to that. So with that in mind, we're going to have a meeting in early September to discuss the outcome of my attempt to just move forward with the help of the State Advocate's Office, which I'd called to set up an appointment for Julie and I to have a meeting either here or there to discuss this in more detail. And the outcome of that was that they hear a lot about this, but they only cover public utility related activities. And Spectrum is outside the umbrella of that.
Oh, my.
So, however, they are advocates for this problem, and they wish to help me, and they help other towns as well, come across with some ideas. And I'm working with another yet to be named party in a bigger area that's already into this deeper than we are with the same issues. And then on the meeting time in September, I'll have a more thorough plan with which to decide which to turn. But it looks like we are left with less than 30 unserved homes in Waldoboro.
Wow.
Within these small pockets, which includes 15 homes on Chapel Road, which fall under the, what we think is contained in the franchise agreement.
Have we surveyed those 30 homes? I mean, if we brought internet to their pole, would they buy it?
They wouldn't pledge in a formal sense necessarily. We've never asked for formal pledges for the providers, because there seems to be no, in other states they sometimes do this, but I haven't seen any evidence of that here in this state, where they actually formally pledge ahead of time that they're going to connect.
Do they have access to other internet servers, like through the phone company, or?
These places? Well, yes, in a few of them, satellites for sure, and mobile.
Mobile, yeah.
Right? And then the third category is that there's DSL in some of these places, but DSL does not fall into the 10 megabits down, 1 megabits up. It's under that.
Yeah.
And although Consolidated is continuing to try and fix the issues that were left to them by Fairpoint and Verizon before them. And there have been improvements, by the way. They're still under the full served category. And so that's where we stand right now.
That's pretty good, though.
And so
30 houses, I mean, that's
right,
awesome.
but I feel there are people that have critical needs, and I can tell you of one case if you'd like, and that involves a person who bought a house on Chapel Road where the real estate agent told them they will have broadband, and they have school-age kids.
Oh, my.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right?
Pitiful.
That is a tough one.
Yes.
And I hate to hear that.
Yeah.
And there's some other details which I don't want to go into right now that are rather revealing as well, that have to do with Chapel Road and that whole sector over there involving Filer's Corner extension where it connects to Old Augusta Road, that area. But anyway, that's it.
All right.
Could I
Thank
add
you,
one
Tom.
thing to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked about this at the meeting, the franchise agreement, which is about television, but also by implication broadband. Talks about 9 houses per mile, that
Right.
paragraph near. It's incumbent on the home to subscribe or to make the application to Spectrum.
Right.
They have to make an application, and we've never.
Which is kind of the
We
pledge,
probably ought to
right?
think about coordinating that. There's
Yeah.
no audit requirement in the franchise agreement.
Yeah.
So we don't know, and we can't, and Spectrum has no obligation to tell us how many applications they have received for a given street or area.
And by the way, they don't demand that before they start, because I just checked that on Deer Run Lane. They went ahead and did that
Right.
without the formality
So,
of that. there's
so why are
precedence.
they not doing Chapel Road?
Right.
Exactly.
So there's precedence for not doing that.
Yeah.
And still calling this current franchise agreement to be in place.
But the approach could be to coordinate the application process, even though they sometimes ignore it.
So the town would take
The
that?
town could coordinate that and
We
write a
did
letter
that with
saying,
the
here are
petition.
9, 10, 15 applicants who want service. We have a franchise agreement. Meet the terms of the
Okay, in
agreement.
the case of LCI, we actually went around and got signatures.
Yep,
On a petition to LCI.
Yep.
To help them with their grant content, because Connect Me requires that as part of the grant process.
right.
And we did that. But Spectrum doesn't, at this point, adhere to any of that in detail. And that's one of the points I'm working on with Heather Johnson and the new director of Connect Me, because they're talking about coming back to these little pockets in the areas that are already served and filling them in with a formal grant process.
Yeah, I'd argue that this isn't a grant issue. This is a franchise agreement
Right.
issue. And
But the
my
way to get
suggestion
around
is
the
we
problem
focus
is
on
to, a new angle is to run it through Connect Me for some grant funding to incentivize the provider, Spectrum, to fill in those little areas.
But you're saying Chapel Road is 15 of the 30? Is that what you said?
Yes, yeah.
That's 50% of the unserved homes.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like that's what you would go after first.
Yeah.
Just a clarification, is that the
I already have
total
their signatures.
unserved properties, 30?
What's that?
Is that the total unserved, or are there some that we haven't calculated?
Well, there's some that are further out.
Further out than.
That have these long runs. Like, for example, Store Mountain Road.
Yeah.
Store Mountain Road, just to get to them is expensive. And then there's only 5 homes up a mile-long road, 4 of which are on one parcel.
All right.
So it's really four parcels.
Yeah.
And this whole conversation is all dealing with spectrum and copper. Fiber optic is so far removed physically that they're not really in the game.
That's an interesting, good point, Ted, because in the case of Store Mountain Road, there's fiber on Old Augusta Road
Yeah.
already there.
Yep.
And it would, but it's only 5 homes total for 5 connections up on that mile-long road. And so it wasn't economically viable there for some unknown reason.
Unless Connect Maine would.
Yet they went up Jackson Road, which is, if you've ever been on Jackson Road, you want to know, why did they do that? And that wasn't something we had any control over. At least I didn't. At that time, Richard Gethner was dealing with them. But Jackson Road is off of Clary Hill Road. And it's a little road that goes way back in the woods up to the end of the, and there's fiber all the way up there.
Wow.
Yeah, in fact, you could get to Store Mountain Road through the woods around the north end of that pond easier that way than it would be to come up to
Wow.
Put the fiber in.
LCI.
That's what I was waiting for.
So
Thank you.
anyway, so that's more details than I really wanted to go into, because those are the typical exceptions to what the model should be, you know, so.
Dan?
Yes, sir.
Not exactly related to John's report, but good news, I think. I've been talking with, as a business person, with LCI about business fiber. I'm happy to report that we just fired Spectrum at the annex, and we put in fiber.
Yeah.
But that's not so important. The important thing is Randall and Rick offered us business fiber at the retail promotional rate. So we're paying $50 a month
Wow.
for 100 symmetrical in the annex.
Wow.
That's 1/4
And
what we
we-
were paying Spectrum.
And that's symmetric, right? Yeah.
And they did the same thing for Sam Pennington at his 2 properties.
That's great.
So that's really important, and we should get the word out there to businesses, not residents per
We have to
se.
be careful with that, because there's a bunch of us in this town who are paying $79 or $80.
Sam was in this trap. Sam had a contract for 3 years, and he was
Yeah.
paying $80, I think, for 1010.
Right.
It was terrible.
That's what I'm paying.
So what I did is approach LCI, just as a business person, saying, we've got some businesses here who want to upgrade. Would you do that? In fact, Spectrum's already doing it. They did that for me at the Brooder. And so we had a good argument. They seem to be saying yes. So I don't know what the case is for residences, which is a bigger number, hopefully. But it should be the case that we should put pressure on them, say, listen, just because you have a contract, you've upgraded the service, Seth can get it his house new, I can't, I'm paying a 30% or 40% penalty, that doesn't make sense.
But from LCI's perspective, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because they're looking at each business individually in that building. How many are there?
We have,
But they're paying one
And they
rate.
you
each-
pay one rate for the whole
No,
building.
the
So you're
whole
dividing
building.
that $50
Yeah.
a
We
month
don't
by
divide
the
it at all,
number
it's just
of
a business
businesses?
cost for me.
It's part of.
And
his
they were
It's a
uncomfortable
service
with
he
that,
provides.
and we explained to them, that's
That's a
the
good
way the
deal.
model is.
Yeah,
That's
so,
good,
so
yeah.
if an individual has fiber in their home already and signed up, was an early adopter,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
We're paying $80.
I know.
And they didn't offer us the reduced price
I
that
know.
they offered to the Mangtown Road people either.
Spectrum is doing
and
the
they
same
don't really
thing.
wanna talk
You have
about
to
it.
twist their arm to breaking before they'll give you the new rate. But they seem to be doing it.
So I'm confused. Oh, say, this is LCI rate or
I'm
Spectrum?
talking about LCI.
Yeah.
Spectrum
Spectrum
unfortunately
twice.
came in and undercut LCI's $50 rate.
Where?
The minute here here and in Booth Bay, I'm told. So they'll give you 110 for $45.
I'd rather have the symmetrical.
Well, of course you would, but that's not the point. But anyway, yes. So it's just a.
But for
No,
most people, it's,
That $5 cheaper option.
yeah.
Yeah, not gonna make a lot of difference.
Yeah. All right.
I think
And
that's good news, though.
you're up. Renewables?
No, just a couple of things. As Julie mentioned, we worked on the RFP and she got it out right on schedule. We did extend it for 2 weeks, right, into September, just to give responders a little better time in the heart of the summer, who knows. So it's not September 1, it's September 15th. Is that correct, Julie? 15th?
Correct. Yep.
We also included a new provision that encourages private businesses and homeowners, for example, along Old Main Street in the historic Village District, to consider adopting efficient lighting on their own dime. The town won't contribute anything, but there's an explicit ask that we do that, and that could even go regionally, which would be good. I was asked to talk to homeowners on Main Street about that, and businesses, and I can't not say I'm getting a very positive response. People don't want to spend 2 cents.
How much would it cost?
Well, for example, if as a homeowner, everybody wanted to put in a street light in the historic district, so 20 street lights, we're probably talking $1,000 a piece, at least. So it's a piece of money.
You're
for most
talking
people.
about streetlights on the street as
Simulated
opposed
gas
to...
streets, yes. That's one thing that would sort of beautify and make historically nice.
But you'd have to get you can't just do every other one, you'd have to,
Yeah,
It would
it's
be on
tricky.
private property?
It would be within the road right of way, because that goes into everybody's yards. But
Yeah, okay.
The response is not great.
how far up, would it go up to my place?
Probably to the Y,
Okay.
where Old Main Road cuts off
Oh,
220.
That's all the way up.
So just the nice strip in town.
Yeah.
And if we wanted to, we could go out Jefferson Street and down Friendship Street. Why wouldn't we?
I would think that would be cool.
I think
But I
it
think
it would really make a difference. Yes.
I think what would probably make some sense is that you would ask the individuals contribute a percentage. I think
Well-
$1,000 for homeowners that's
Yeah.
a big ask.
I
It
think
is,
so,
but then
too.
we have the town funding issue. And this town has trouble coming up with investment funding for almost anything. In terms of new investment, that's a very slippery slope. I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
So we should continue that. And there's no time limit. We can always add these things afterwards.
Okay, I have a question about this, and it has to do with hotspots in the village.
Yes.
Hotspots being wireless connectivity for somebody traveling through the area. And one of the proposals is coming from a company that provides the wherewithal to put a little module on the light
Yep.
fixture.
Yeah. So
Is that still an active part of this RFP?
absolutely. In fact, it's very well fleshed out. Not only Wi-Fi hotspots, but environmental monitoring and control.
Very good, okay.
Anything you want. This proposed solution from the proposers will have to have all of that infrastructure, mountability and connectability built into their proposal.
Excellent,
Yeah,
thank
So
you.
it's good.
So walk me through this one more time. So the street lighting,
Yep.
going up, if we went up Main Street, right now we have these poles with a light on them, and
Telephone
lots
poles.
of telephone and lots of other stuff. And so is this a separate pole?
Yeah, so the.
So we take
idea
the
with-
light off that pole and put up separate?
Those lights are gonna be converted to LEDs.
Okay.
Either way, period. That's just gonna happen. That's
Yeah.
what the RFP is about.
Yeah.
The CMP mounted poles. So the
Yeah.
old arms come off, the old fixture comes off, and
Yeah.
it's replaced with a high efficiency, new everything.
Hopefully better than the flags.
Not going there. But, and that includes, as John suggests, high functioning connectivity, high tech mounting brackets and things built
Okay.
into the system.
Okay,
For
got it.
anything else we want to use. The street lights that just some of us are kicking around that are not included in that would be for example, cast aluminum, retro-looking gas lamps, which really add an enormous amount to a village district.
Which is mounted on the pole, or?
No, mounted in the ground.
Separate pole.
Cast iron, think of the old.
No, I got that. So then we would get rid of the existing.
Not necessarily, no.
You'd have two lights.
It would be
No,
redundant,
but
I would.
we can also get historic arms for the downtown
Yes.
district with the LED, which is probably what some of these companies will suggest.
Yes.
So if we do that, see, and that gets to my point, which is then it's a delta. In other words, to upgrade to the ornamental arm might be $200, or I don't know what the amount is, but it'll be a delta from what they're doing now. And maybe it's more likely people would be willing to pay that than.
Well, people wouldn't pay that piece. The town would pay for the replacement arm. The town manager's office, and perhaps the select board would have to say, yes, we'll approve the $200 delta for that 6 lamps or 20 lamps or whatever that is. But that's part of the RFP. We're talking about private investment by private businesses and landowners and nonprofits who want to upgrade their LED lighting. And we've asked them to extend it to anybody who wants to do LED lighting, basically buying in bulk. So if somebody, a gas station on Route 1 wants to get rid of their halogen or sodium vapor lamps, we hope that the proposer will help them do that at their cost completely.
Okay.
We need a careful explanation for the general public on exactly how the electricity costs are impacted by these various lighting abilities. We can't have an open-ended major increase that isn't understood. The reduction needs to be sold carefully.
Yeah, well, in the proposal, there is cost justification, and they need to show us the analysis. We've already done a thumbnail.
Exactly.
But that's part of, by virtue of going out for the proposal, we've already accepted that we're going to save a bundle of money. It will take a little bit of upfront, but it's huge numbers after that.
Down the
Another
road.
The energy
technology
cost.
educational opportunity.
Yes. Okay. Any other things about LEDs?
Just
No.
one additional point, and that is that the stuff we're gonna put up on the street, on the telephone poles, that's charged by the watt. So LEDs are far less expensive because the wattage is so much lower.
Yeah.
What
It's almost
Seth's
10 to
talking
1.
about would be charged based on usage. So there would be a meter somewhere in someone's house or business.
Right.
That would charge, and again, that cost incrementally would be very low because they're
Yes.
such
So if
low
somebody
consumers.
was going to be
Right.
doing that, putting that money out to do that upgrade, it would be theirs, they could turn it on and off whenever they wanted.
Exactly.
Yes.
It would belong to that person, and the responsibility would be that person.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Got it.
Wow.
And we can think of things like the Spro Block as first adopters because they have these big lights that illuminate that don't have really good glare and
Shielded.
they're not shielded. What's the word I'm
They
looking
don't
for?
protect you can't see the damn stars.
You can't see the damn stars. That's right. There's a name for that. Where you-
Yeah.
I'm just dropping it. But yes, those would be at the investor or the owner's sole expense, both for conversion and for energy. But by virtue of buying by volume through this RFP, could be very attractive to anybody,
Yeah,
including
right.
the town. And the DPW building is the same. That's not really included, but they have a lot of lighting, interior and exterior.
Yep.
Why not convert it? So, okay. Solar array. I wasn't here last month, I'm afraid. We had a really weird anomaly turn up in the data and in the billing resulting from the data by virtue of the array's connection to CMP. It turns out, with a little investigation, that a component required to connect the meter to the production output, the big wires, the three-phase wires of the inverters, at the array, this is on our side before it goes to the grid, were defective. They were labeled. These are called current transformers. It's a coil that you clip around a big wire and it measures the current both ways.
CTs. Yep.
CTs, yeah. They were apparently Solar Edge had a bunch of them mislabeled by the manufacturer in China in terms of polarity.
Wonderful.
Well, and how this got by our installer, I'm afraid I don't know. But anyway, so we discovered this. I discovered this. Brought it to the attention of Solar Edge, then brought it to to Julie and Sundog Solar. who fixed it. What happened is they put them in according to instructions, and we were pulling power off.
Or it looked like we were.
Whatever we thought we were
You were
putting
getting
on.
negative current.
Yes. So we were consuming exactly what we were producing. And of course that affects the bill, right? Yeah. They say that's been fixed.
Yeah,
we
they
have yet
said,
to...
I talked with Chuck extensively about that, and it was fixed.
Yes,
and they were able to back out the numbers properly, so we're working with CMP on that.
Good.
Yes, and we'll see over the next few months how that all reconciles. The good news is there's no ambiguity about how much power the array has been producing.
Good.
Whether it's negative or positive, the number's real.
So that you can negotiate an adjustment, in other words.
Yes, it'll just be pro forma. They'll just reverse it and apply it. According to Chuck, there was a problem with CMP in doing the billing right, unrelated to all of this, and I hear that's been sorted out. Is that right, or is it about to be sorted out, Julie?
Yes, they have. We just got from Erskine an email where the credits have been applied. So because we were just accumulating credits and they weren't getting applied because it all has to be done manually now. Yeah. So our billing is running later than everybody else's. So they just got Stockton Springs set up properly, and now they're setting us up properly. But we just got the first set of bills that looked right. But now they have to go back and adjust all our bills since. So that's what they are in the process of doing now.
Good. Okay. So.
And what didn't help is that our governmental liaison, who lived in Waldoboro, left right before we went online. So. Getting the new person to be as helpful as
unrelated to this, there's some kind of data reporting error, it looks like, in terms of, if you look at the kiosk, and this has been going on since the installation, and I haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet. Between 11:30 and 3 o'clock in the daytime, at the highest production hours, we have what looks like a curve that goes like this, as the sun goes up around noon, and then it drops 1/3 exactly, diddles around there for about half an hour, drops another third. It's a very, I didn't bring plots, I'm sorry, but you can see it at noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right up until 3 or 4. It looks to me, or looked to me, like we might have inverter clipping, which means for some reason one of the inverters, there are 3 of them, thought it should shut down for some reason, and it's precipitous. It's an immediate clip. Yeah. And there's a little ledge and it goes down again. I've been documenting this for 3 months, talking with Sundog Solar about it. By the time 8 o'clock at night comes around, the historical graph is fixed. It's not clear, because I haven't done the analysis of the underlying data, which I have access to for the committee, whether the real numbers are being modified by that. The daily aggregation are 800 kilowatt hours a day, which is a little bit low for our array. It should be a little bit higher. We just don't know, and it's going to take some time to figure out. I'm assured that that's not the case, but we should at least insist that the display to the public is corrected, because it's really weird. If you're standing out here looking at our kiosk, it looks like our array turned off in the middle of the day for 3 hours. So.
From what Sundog said, it's a lag in the communications between the array and the kiosk.
Yep.
That's how it was explained. That there's not an actual reduction. It's a data issue. I don't know. That's beyond my capability, to be honest with you. But that's what
Latency.
Sundog's answer to that.
But latency only during that time is a little odd.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
With all due respect,
spectrum.
that's poppycock.
Yeah, they're wrong on that.
Our expert here, Jan, agrees it's completely wrong. Yeah. So we just need to get to the bottom of this, and that's the reason I mentioned it.
Well, and if one of the inverters is dropping out, then we're losing 1/3 of our production.
That's my concern. And if 2 of them are dropping out, and it appears to be,
You're
we're losing peak
two-thirds of-
production,
yeah.
2/3 for 3 hours a day.
Sounds to me like Chinese quality control.
No, I wouldn't go that
I
far,
don't
but
know.
it could be a design limitation, and
Right.
the inverters are clipping on purpose because they're undersized.
Is it
Now,
all-
I'm not just speculating, I'm not claiming that,
Yeah,
but I do know
Well,
something.
I
about
think
it.
it would be, Chuck said he'd be more than happy to come and talk to everybody about that, so that might be something that we do, and have him come in and explain it to all of you.
Yeah, and I'd like to see the graphs.
Yeah, we need the data first, and then really, I'll circulate the graphs that I've provided to Sundog and to Julie and to Solar Edge, and their explanations back.
And you could actually, Seth, you could calculate what kilowatt hours you should be
Absolutely,
receiving
yeah.
based on the graph.
Yes.
And then you could actually determine whether we're getting
Yes.
penalized or not for
Yeah.
those drops.
Either way, from the public's perspective, Julie mentioned that we were about to relocate the kiosk to a more visible place where everybody's standing in front of the counter, which would be great. I hope that'll happen soon. But that means more people are going to see this weird behavior, and they're going to be scratching their heads. What the hell is this all about? So we should get it fixed, is my only point. I'm not concerned.
I hate to be the wet blanket, but nobody ever asks questions about any of that, and plenty of people still see it.
Maybe they
I'm
would.
starting to think that, you know, wherever it is, people see it one time, and it's not something that they're engaged in, unfortunately.
Are we still planning on moving it, as you told me?
Yeah, I can, but I'm just letting everybody know that the same thing with the LCI display is nobody looks at it. You know, like when people are there, they really are there to register their vehicle. They really just don't. That's the kind of stuff that we've been monitoring, and it's kind of a sad commentary, but you know, because like, you know, if somebody is looking at it, Mel there said a couple times, well, if you have questions, ask Julie, you know, da-da-da-da-da, and I have not had one person come in the last 2 months and ask anything.
So one of the major benefits, Julie, to have it in a place where people run across it easily is part of our marketing. I mean, it's part.
I did that. I just wanted you guys to know
Yeah.
that it's probably a lot less than everybody thinks. We think it's cool because we've been involved in it. It's just not.
It's not really
cool
noticeable
as
where it
we
is.
think it is with the general
really
public.
Pretty hard to see
Julie, we've been talking about this for months. Could we have a commitment from management to move that thing in some foreseeable future soon?
Reasonably soon. I mean, you know, I can try to have that accomplished because LCI has to move their stuff so that it can be moved over there.
Yes, and Bill mentions too that it's not obvious where the link advertising this for marketing and public exposure purposes online on our website. In fact, I don't even know. I have my own link that Sundog gave me, and I've circulated it to everybody here. But from the website, it'd be great to have that display in a small window right on the website. So when you went to Waldeboro,
Yeah, Liam tried to set that up and had issues with it. That might have to wait until our website overhaul.
That might be more difficult.
okay, but at least a text link would be good. Look what our array is doing, just as a link, a hot link. You know.
Like a URL link.
Bill, can you ask Liam to do that today for me, or Max?
Sure.
Yep.
Great. Okay. Moving on, the conversations with RSU 40, Steve Nolan, and their business manager, Carla, continue, and I think I'll be meeting with them next week. They're prepared to give me all the underlying data, just the way we did for the municipal RFP, that'll allow us to analyze demand charges on a per-site basis for their multiple school meters. In order to generate a serious RFP for them, we need to know what that picture looks like because of the recovery limitations of net metering not covering the cost of demand charges.
Right.
So they seem excited about it, and we hope to. I hope to have data to crunch within a week or so. Anything else? Municipal building is ongoing question for the town manager. How are the explorations of LED in heating and cooling upgrades for this building going? Are you?
The LED I gave to Jan at the last UBC meeting. I don't know what his report is back on that.
And heating and cooling? Our ancient systems?
Heating and cooling, done in July, so we have to go through and have all the proposals redone for this year. So if that's something that the Res Committee would like to get involved with, that would be lovely, and they can work with Marcus on that.
We would love to do that, I'm sure. So is that an ask?
That's an ask.
Okay, noted.
And but we need to include Marcus, because Marcus now is buildings and grounds, so that just has to be coordinated with Marcus.
Sure, will do. And I think that's it for me.
One piece of information that may be helpful on the solar thing. CMP came in and changed out our net meter, so it's now automatic. They always had to do a physical read.
Wow.
And now they're coming there. We'll see if it works. But they say they can now read at long distance.
Do you have a separate meter?
Sorry?
Do you have a separate meter for your array? Or is it just the same
It's
smart meter?
the same meter does everything.
Okay.
One meter does everything.
Wirelessly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like our smart meters on our houses,
It is a smart meter.
it is
Yeah.
a smart meter.
which are all questioned now in the big class action lawsuit.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Seth.
Yes,
Read
yes.
about that.
Yep.
And we had the same issues that you guys were having on our reading for solar. They neglected to bank our hours for 2 months straight.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just the array here.
Rest assured that notwithstanding the assurance of Sundog, we're on this, and it's not going to escape our notice, and we will get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Both the display issue and the actual underlying data that generates the billing, those are the important things.
Right.
That's money.
So they still have all the raw data that was, at the time it was
Right.
collecting. And so it's just like emails, you can get a hold of those old things, right?
It's on the
And then
inverters.
reprocess the data, the raw data.
Well, one tricky part is the inverters use the CTs to generate the raw data. So we may have to do some data extrapolation based on the weather. It may get a little bit hairier than just reading raw
Oh,
data,
that's
which is
bad.
wrong.
Yeah.
But that too is easy. It's, as John pointed out, it's just a curve.
Yeah.
You just project the curve, and if it didn't rain that day, you know the curve is valid. We have
Unless they
no
equal
data for the weather.
Right, right.
All right, well, I'm going to move along to our last piece of
The
old
last
business.
item, because I got about 5 minutes.
Yep, which is the pamphlet. So at the last meeting, we said, EDC members said there was a different direction with the recent version.
Yep.
Yeah.
And want the focus
You
to
were
be
the one
more
who
on
were
how
complaining.
Waldoboro is a diverse business community. And Max, you were going to take a stab at that, and have you been able to do that, or?
No, I haven't.
Did anybody respond to your email about moving things around?
Seth sent an email
Yeah.
with his notes. I have to work with Marcia, set up a time with her to do that, because I can't do Photoshop, so.
Yeah.
So my only comment would be this, that we can't let individuals drive the pamphlet anymore. So if somebody wants to make a change to the pamphlet, they need to bring that change to us, and we need to vote on it. Because otherwise, we'll be in this loop forever.
We'll be going back
Because
and
somebody
forth.
will look at that and go, why aren't there people? And then somebody else will look at it and go, why aren't there more buildings? And you'll spend the rest of
That's
your
what you've
life,
been doing.
every month, changing it.
That's
So-
kind of been the process.
So
of
I would prefer now that you don't change this,
That's the way it is.
that you come back to the committee with a list of recommended changes that some individuals somewhere may have made, and that we get to vote on whether we want to make those changes.
And Bob, you were the one who said you found it duplicative, but you never gave any examples, so that was like, I didn't know what you were talking about.
I did give examples, and
Not to me.
I'll point them out.
Okay,
But
so
who's running it now? Who's in charge of the, is
We are.
Max?
We are.
Max is,
Max is the person who's the
Max, the point
go-between
man.
with
Okay.
Marcia.
Max is making the changes, but my point is, I don't want individuals driving change, I want the committee to drive change.
Agreed.
So can I make a recommendation, and we can make
Absolutely.
this an action item if we want, or a motion? I just submitted a bunch of small
Yeah, there
editing
were some
text,
grammatical
very,
stuff.
very small, but noticeable, 18 or 20 of them. I make a motion that we incorporate those changes, subject to approval, of Max. They're just syntactical in spelling. And then we publish this thing. And then we start accumulating suggestions for the next printing iteration. But that we get the damn thing out there.
So I'm in agreement with making the changes. I'm not in agreement with publishing it yet, because there's other members.
We'd like to all look at it.
We'd like to have one
No,
more,
sure,
Do one
subject
more
to
round
review.
robin.
subject to
So
review.
maybe next
Next meeting,
And then get it out there.
I
We've sort of
totally
missed the
agree.
summer.
I'm 100% on
Yeah.
We
board with
did
that.
miss
Yeah.
the summer.
Yeah,
Time to go.
time to go. To S or get off the pot, as they like to say. Any new business that we haven't covered? Meeting adjourned? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie.
Bye.
Be safe. Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
So
Julie.
you have that meeting coming up with those, the 100. what's it called?
28th, I think, Wednesday.
Or Wednesday, 20.